Hello, everyone. Today we're going to meet Eric Dreshfield, Salesforce MVP and founder of Midwest Dreamin. I think you're really going to like this episode. Eric, thanks for joining the show. I really appreciate it. I think we've met each other. I don't even know. I'm sure it's over a year now. First time way back when. And I have to tell you, I follow anytime you do any kind of post anywhere or, you're speaking somewhere. And I'm like, man, that guy's doing it better than I am for sure. And, it's funny. When I was looking at your LinkedIn page, I saw. I think it's in one of your taglines. It says something like what is it? The 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon of Salesforce or something like that.
Yeah, I self-proclaimed the title of the Kevin Bacon of the Salesforce ecosystem.
Okay. So what's funny about that is I immediately laughed about it. And then I'm like, I just think I'm dating myself because I bet there's probably lots of people who don't even know who Kevin Bacon is anymore. He's still
Right.
making movies, but I remember when that whole thing came out. I'm sure it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it was a funny thing to play. But I think in your case, I think it's probably right. I mean, like I said, it seems like you have so many connections in the world, in the Salesforce world. It's very impressive. And
Yep.
why don't you tell the audience a little about yourself, how you got started, who you are, why you're so famous in the Salesforce world?
Sure. I got my Salesforce start back in 2009. It was what I guess you could call just a case of being at the right place at the right time. I was not an accidental admin, as some people tend to be, or that seems like that was pretty popular recently. I was working as a call center agent, a temporary position at the time for a software company as they were getting ready to roll out some new software for their customers. And they anticipated a need for additional support to answer questions and help their customers work through some issues with the software. And this was long enough ago where they weren't in the cloud. So literally the company mailed out discs to their customers. The customers threw it in the drives, did the stuff, and if it blew up, they called tech support. And I was one of the people that was on that line when they called. It was interesting. It was challenging. It was fun. I talked to lots of people all around the world. I was probably one of 15 people in the call center at that point in time who were actually on the phones with the customers, helping them out with their problems. And solving their problems took anywhere from 5 minutes to a couple of hours, depending on what the issue really was. So lots of research, lots of trying to figure out what the problems were, digging through notes and all that stuff to figure out what to do and how to fix things. But I'd been in this position for about 6 months already. Initially, when they hired me and they said, this is a temp job, we're probably looking at 8 to 12 weeks while we roll out this new piece of software. And then the call volume we expect to drop off significantly and we won't need you anymore. And at that point in time, I was like, that's fine. I said, I'm looking for work.
Right.
12 to 15 weeks at good money is better than 12 to 15 weeks at no money. So I'll take my chances and see what happens. Like I just said a minute ago, 6 months into this position, I'm still there. I'm still doing the thing. And they approached me about a business analyst position to help them launch Salesforce to the call center that I was currently working in. Prior to this position, I had roles that were all in and around technology for many years, utilizing software products, whether they were cloud-based back then or databases or PC versions of things, or running Novell networks and actually even like crawling around in ceilings and pulling cables to build the networks. Those are all the things that I used to do way back in the day. And this company said, we have this business analyst position that we're looking to fill to help us launch Salesforce, and we think you've got what it takes to do that job. And my response to the hiring manager at that point in time was, what's Salesforce? I've never heard of it. And her response was, don't worry about it. I think you'll understand it. And like 2 weeks later, I'm on the job learning Salesforce at the same time as implementing it for this company with the call center in mind the whole time, trying to make sure that call center managers and staff are going to get what they need to keep doing their jobs and keep satisfying the customers and doing all that stuff. And it was a blast. I loved it. So it was an interesting challenge to say the least, but it was a lot of fun, and it really got me going in the Salesforce ecosystem and sparked my curiosity, I guess you could say, about all things Salesforce.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I also coincidentally got started with Salesforce in 2008. Our stories could have been written by the same person. And it was very different cast of characters, obviously, but very much the same thing. And it's just like the owner of a company is just like, I bought this thing called Salesforce, and I'd caught friends in the business world that bought it, and I'm not really sure what it does, and make it work here. And I'm just like, what? And the only thing I could relate it to at that time, because at that point, I had way back when became certified in SAP and Oracle, which, obviously were these behemoth ERPs at that time. And,
Right.
that's the only thing I could kind of sort of relate it to, excuse me. And it's just one of those things. It's like, hey, I think I can figure it out. I just kept going with it. I
Yeah.
think what was the most interesting thing back in those days, and I guess for listeners here, is Eric and I obviously have some experience years behind us, but in my opinion, it makes us all the more relevant for today's world, because back then it was like, I think I'm buying a magical wizard called Salesforce, and I paid for it. So therefore I'm going to, deploy it to everybody in my firm, and all my problems are going to be fixed. And seriously, I mean, there are many people even to this day that I deal with that are just like, well, it's going to give me better processes. I think you might have something to do with those better processes, And it's funny, Eric, you made me think back to my own beginnings in the technology world. And I remember, true story, before Wi-Fi, that I had a customer who was running a division either in Houston or in Dallas. And at the time I was in Philadelphia, and they were sick of dealing with their local office-based technology team. And I flew down, I still remember this. I flew down with a duffel bag of network cable. And at the time it was the coax cables, and with these humongous dongles that connected into serial ports. And I flew down with, a bag of everything I could think of, and installed a wired network just so everybody in that cubicle corral had access to the humongous HP LaserJet printer in the corner. And I remember as I was scrambling on the Sunday to get my flight back to Philly, and as I was just wrapping up, I remember the head of technology of the office saw me, like, in my jeans, like it was like I was working on a car in the garage. I was like on my back scrambling, and he's like, who are you and what are you doing? And I told him. He's like, no, we're going to be doing that next, whatever quarter, year, whatever. I'm like, well, you take it up with the division head. I'm out of here. And it was, I guess you'd say it was the wild, wild west in a little bit of a way of speaking. And, I think nowadays I get a lot of parallels to that with the injection of all of the AI world out there. Whether it's, Agentforce inside of Salesforce, which obviously has a huge amount of customizations available to it, or the AI automation that precedes the CRM, or the AM automation that could, potentially be post in the process. And I find it extremely exciting. I just actually reposted something that I saw, that one of Mark Benioff's quotes about, potentially Salesforce customer support agents being, reshuffled because of Agentforce's capabilities. I don't know if that's just a PR splash or reality, but those things are exciting and scary at the same time.
Right.
To
Yeah,
me.
that's true. Yep. No, totally. I understand that completely. And it makes a lot of sense. And the
Yeah.
problems you and I had 20 years ago are the same problems people are having today, where they think that's the magic bullet. But what they're forgetting about is all the data behind it needs to be in a good place for that magic bullet to do its magic.
And now I'm watching YouTube channels about, the, AI agent that has popped up in the last, since I went to bed, 8 hours ago. I almost get this like business process anxiety. I'm like, I can think of 100 ways how I can use this. I need to learn this more. And that part's exciting. That part's
Yeah.
exciting. So I have a question for you from an overarching standpoint, with your amazing connectivity into the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm assuming you've thought a lot about AI, whether it's Agentforce or otherwise. What's your prediction? Where do you think what's next?
And maybe I should pop open Chat GPT and ask.
Boom. What I have to tell you, I had a conversation with someone over the weekend, and they were asking me how to use AI, and it did exactly what you just did. But actually, I pulled it up on my phone. I was using Perplexity,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, let's just ask AI what AI is going to.
Right. That's a funny approach, but it can give you some interesting reads. Personally though, I think we're still really, really early in the life cycle of this, and the growth rate is going to be pretty intense, pretty phenomenal. And as more and more organizations realize the potential power that it's going to present to them, and the ability they're going to have to better support their customers, potentially with less people on their staff, but maybe not. I think the uptake is only going to increase in its utilization.
What do you think about the owners, leaders, whatever we want to call them, do you think they trust AI yet?
That's a really good question. When you first think about AI, or at least for me, when I first think about AI, the first images that kind of come to my mind are from way back when, from science fiction movies and things like that, where there's these robots walking around and talking to people and
Right.
not necessarily doing what the people expect them to do. Uh,
It's the basis of every sci-fi horror movie there is, I think, right?
Right? Yeah, machines are taking over the world. Oh my goodness. Now what do we do? Right? We got to get rid of the machines. But I think as companies start to realize the AI is really going to benefit them and what they need to do to prep for it, and the fact that it's all based upon their own data or external data sources. And as long as that data is in good shape and it's clean and it
Right.
represents what's going on, the results they're going to get should be pretty decent and should help steer them in a better direction faster than what they would have done on their own.
Yeah, what I think, obviously, I think we probably sit here for an hour and come up with bullet points about, concerns and issues and considerations. While you were just speaking, though, I thought of something that I've written about before about one for a leader. If they're listening, if you think your staff, whether your corporation has an AI process or adopted something officially or not, if you think your people aren't using AI, you're wrong. And you better put a corporate policy of expected use to protect your butt. Because there's a hell of a lot of risk out there with somebody trying to meet a deadline in your company who is using internal information to derive better answers and don't understand who they're sharing potentially that information with. And the other concern I have is that, and this is more of a human fear that I have, not for myself, but that's really condescending thing to say in my head here. But what I was going to say is I'm fearful that, in the old days when you had a project to do, and it was like, let's just say it was due at Monday morning, that meant you're going to be pulling all weekend thing and ordering metric ton of pizzas over the weekend and working with people in a conference room. And nowadays it's much more of a point and click exercise that can be done very, very quickly. And my concern is that people are going to become so impressed with the speed that they're not going to do their due diligence and check what it's actually being said.
Yeah, that's a realistic possibility,
Yeah.
just simply because of how quickly and easily artificial
Right.
intelligence gathers data and shares what we expect to be relevant or what we interpret as relevant.
Right, exactly. I saw a funny reel on one of the social media platforms, and maybe you've seen it, but it's this caricature interviewing another person for a job position, and the one character says, or the interviewer says, "Wow, it says here that you are very, very fast with math," and the interviewee says, "I am the fastest with math," and the interviewer says something like, "Well, what's 57 times 380?" And the interviewee goes, 47. And the other guy goes, "That wasn't even remotely close." And the guy goes, "Yeah, but it was fast." And I think about it is like, I mean, AI is obviously getting better. And
Yep.
and but you touched on a point that I think is of paramount importance, is that if you are using AI and you tell it to look at the documents, your own intellectual property, your own best of breed presentations, or whatever it is that you do, then it's not going to get things wrong. It's not. If you confine its search to what you wanted to know, which all tools can basically do now, you are in a much better place.
Right.
And speaking of which, and so here's the next question for you regarding Agentforce. Obviously, it can be contained within the Salesforce ecosystem of your company, right?
Right. Right.
And which just by itself provides a lot of risk protection against, I was talking about policies of AI at a company. It really can help you, a company, a leader, get even more faith that, unless, maybe you tell AI only look in that repository that, Salesforce and Agentforce has access to, then things really, start to get more, comfortable. for lack of a better term, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
have you had any experience with that yet? I mean, just even larger scale agent force or even research of with?
Not a whole lot yet, but my hunch is that you're going down the right path with your reactions to it. That simply because it's contained within Salesforce, there's that built-in trust factor. Knowing that it's only utilizing the data you already have in Salesforce,
So
there's a comfort level, I guess.
so going back to 2008 until this morning, what do you think, what changes have you seen that in whether it's the use of the systems or the acceptance of the systems, adoption, whatever, your pick, but what do you think the big changes are?
Obviously, the use of the system has grown immensely. Probably not consistently. I mean, it was probably more of one of those, what is that, a sine wave or something
One of
where it
those
picks up
waves that we all
speed
forget
and
the name. Yeah.
right, yeah. The faster it goes, the more it picks up speed, and the trajectory just keeps growing up higher and higher instead of just the
Hmm.
constant adoption. But I think part of what I think Agent Force and those AI technologies are going to do is give organizations and their staff the ability to focus a little bit more on the human side of things still, where sales reps, for example, will be able to have more personalized, more one-on-one conversations with potential customers to help gain the trust of the customer, to help increase the sales velocity, to help make things like that happen, because the artificial intelligence piece is going to take over some of
Yeah.
those mundane tasks that the salespeople or whoever it is, whoever's job this is, it's going to take over the repetitive stuff that it can do very well and very much faster than the humans can. That frees up the humans to do this, to have sessions, to keep the community active, and
I think there's a real challenge here for I'm just going to use the word generically Salesforce administrator, but there's obviously many different roles and certifications, but I'm just going to use it in a blanket statement. There is a few years ago, it was, in my opinion, it was also always very hard to ensure adoption was as high as it could be, determining who wasn't using the system that should have been using the system with an attempt to use that information to help justify the ROI of the system so that you could get the next project going. And excuse me. And as I look at that now, it's interesting to think, is AI going to make this better or worse? Or is it indifferent? I don't know. It's not a rhetorical question. I don't know that answer. So I will say, I remember, and there's an analogy here, just wait for it for a second. I remember when years ago I was putting a travel agency online for a corporation, like getting a new travel agency. And then your consultants would always complain, man, I can get it cheaper on Expedia. Why would I use these people? Blah, 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 blah. So I'm wondering if something similar that could happen with someone saying, I don't want to use the AI in the for example, Agent Force. I'm going to use my own whatever. Obviously, the argument or the thing they can't do is get access to the internal corporate information with an external standalone AI. So maybe
right.
it's a moot point. But I think Agent Force in particular for Salesforce administrators, developers, etc., is a huge opportunity because there's going to be an art, not just a technology, an art of connecting this tool into Salesforce and then aligning it with the processes of each individual firm. I think it's going to be enormous, and I think it's something that everyone should be looking at. I mean, admins. It's interesting. So I also do a lot of work in the HubSpot world, and HubSpot has taken a different strategy on their AI platform. So their AI platform is called Breeze. And I actually attended an event recently, and their head of AI, a gentleman named Nick Holland, really good guy, real smart guy. But, their approach basically is they have Breeze already, basically on most input forms, fields, whether it's creating an event, a meeting, and you click on a contact's name and AI is just taking over and giving you a summary of everything. And it's just like they've made some assumptions of what a user is going to want at that place. And they're purposely trying to make it available now to everybody, let's just say on a less customized level. Now, of course, you can still customize it. It's not trying to be everything to everybody. It's trying to be 80% to everybody. And as a result, in my opinion, they really have executed it well. It's actually caught me off guard sometimes when I go somewhere, and I even thought of like, what would AI look like if I was looking at this report? And all of a sudden, this little thing pops up and tells me something that just is, and it's also part of their the main package. It's not like an add-on, and you're not paying for credits and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a really interesting way that they've done it. And it's funny because I go back to what I was saying about it's an art form. I think it's a way it's implemented. And one way or the other, there is going to be a sense of human style in the way that it is implemented. So it's not going to be these robots necessarily, in my opinion, taking over the world. It's going to be a person controlling these things and how they interoperate with the user themselves. It's pretty cool. So I guess as a follow up to that, and I'll put you a little bit on the spot. If we were 20 something again, it was last week, 20 something, and what do you think you would do? Let's just say you made the decision that you wanted to be in the Salesforce space. Where do you think you would focus?
Wow. Do I have the current knowledge
Yeah,
back then as
sure.
well?
You got the time warp room down the hallway and you jump through it.
That's a good one. I think the first reaction that comes to my mind is I would still want to be very community focused and very involved in the community because to me, I've felt like this for many years. Everything starts with the human contact. I mean, the business world, the outside the business world, everything starts with a person talking to another person or interacting with other humans in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I've been married to my wife now 26 years almost, and we met in a chat room online back in 1999. Back before that
AOL
stuff,
or something like that. Yeah.
back before dating sites existed. It
Right.
was screen name and the text, and we met online in February and got married in June, and it's been almost 26 years now for us being
Awesome.
together.
Congratulations. And you became a new grandfather, didn't you recently?
Technically, it's great grandfather, but yes, yeah.
Wow.
My youngest granddaughter had a baby boy about 10 weeks ago. Cute little guy, that's for sure. He's added some enjoyment to our.
Incredible. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's been a fun ride. So, I mean, that's one of the things I'm enjoying. Not that we're necessarily working so much right now. Is my wife and I get to spend a lot of time with the little guy
Right.
because our granddaughter's back at work. So, back to the AI question and the what kind of advice would I give myself if I knew all this today, and how would I talk to myself 20 years ago? I think the first thing I would probably say is be careful what you do and how you do it because it has consequences. Everything does. It requires a little bit of foresight and thought as to how you might want to process something. Obviously, everybody's aware of the dare I use the word danger of bad data and duplicates in a system and the unintended consequences perhaps that may come out of some of that stuff. I think I got an email from an organization within the last couple of days that had the old hi first name last name rather than my actual first and last name in the email somewhere. So something got missed by somebody on that end, and that's poor customer service. It gives a bad impression of the organization.
Right.
So keep in mind, I guess, start with the end in mind, maybe is where I'm trying to go with this. What is it? What's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And work backwards to how do you get there?
It's interesting you just said that. And once again, flashbacks to things that I've done that are very, very similar. And in a similar vein to what you just said, is I also tell my staff to be conscious of the perspective of the person that you're trying to deliver to. It's not what you think is good. It's what they think is good. And when you write that email, even if you're frustrated or maybe you're so deep into the technical weeds, read your email back as if you're the person receiving it. And if it even remotely makes you question, trust me, rewrite it. Anything like that. So yeah, that's really good advice. And I think the number one thing I would tell myself is the value of networking and making professional friends, relationships. I've been doing it hardcore since basically COVID, like really hardcore. And the more I do it, the more I enjoy it. The more I do public speaking, the more I enjoy it. And I'm like, man, if I would have been doing this for the last 25, 30 years, who knows what I'd be doing right now? I mean, it's kind of like that thing, like, it's, what is it? If you do something you enjoy, you never work a day in your life or something like that.
Right. Yep.
And I'm like, man, I would be having the ball. But what we're talking about right now, love it. I could do it all day with you.
Yeah. Yep.
So I have a question now going about community. So tell us how you started the whole Midwest Dreamin' and where that's going. And I know it's coming up in a couple months. So tell me about it. How did you get that started?
Yeah, so very early in my Salesforce career, the woman who hired me from them being a call center agent into that business analyst role, one of the first things she told me when I started working in that BA role, and granted, I was working in Evansville, Indiana, where their call center was, the corporate office was in San Diego. So it was kind of a remote type experience to some degree. And when I took this promotion to the BA role, she did tell me, you don't have to come to the office every day. You can work from home if you want to, as long as you get your job done. She says, I
What
don't
year was
believe
that?
that was 2009.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't care where you're working or when you're working, just do your job
Hmm.
and be available as others need you, which was pretty cool.
Wow. It's ahead of the curve. Yeah, sure.
My first thought back then was, I got to go to the office because I'll be more productive there.
Yeah.
And when I started working from home occasionally for this company, because of things that the family needed that required me to be at home, I discovered I was more productive at home than I was in the office. I had a very, very specific room in the house that was my office when I was working from
That's
home.
important.
And when I was in that room, the kids and my wife knew, bother him, he's busy working. Knock on the door first, wait for him to answer, don't just barge in, that kind of thing. So it kind of set the ground rules, I guess you could say, early on in that aspect of things. But it was interesting for me to realize I'm more productive at home than at the office when I was doing that. But where I was going with this whole conversation here was that particular boss, when she hired me into that role, the first thing she said to me when I went out to California on my third week in the job, I've spent a week out there with the team. She said, what you need to do is find a local Salesforce community in your area, meet people and help, because they will help you learn Salesforce through just sharing their knowledge and their experience.
And was your boss on the West Coast?
Yes, she was in
Okay.
San Diego. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so back then there was not a user group or community group in Evansville, Indiana. So I started driving to community group meetings around the Midwest. Chicago, Indianapolis, Louisville, Lexington, Nashville, Columbus, Ohio. I think I even went to St. Louis. And I'd spend a day or day and a half a month on the road going to and from these meetings to meet people and learn about Salesforce. And after, I don't know, 6 to 8 months of doing that, my little brain said,
Mm.
you can't be the only person in Evansville, Indiana using Salesforce. So I found somebody at Salesforce to reach out to and say, hey, what's it take to start a user group in my city? Because I think there's probably a need. And their reaction was, congratulations, thanks for volunteering to lead the group. I had at them and saying, no, 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 that's not what I asked. I know this much about Salesforce. I need to know a ton. The wrong person to lead a group because I don't know anything. A few conversations later, in about 6 weeks, I launched the local Evansville Salesforce user group. Had 5 or 6 people show up for that very first meeting who were thrilled to only have to drive an hour to
Right.
come to a meeting rather than 2.5 to 3 hours to go to some other major city to go to a Salesforce community group meeting. And that group has been in existence mostly since then, and I've been leading it. COVID took a little breather. I've been struggling to get it back again after COVID. We've had a couple of meetings here and there, but that started me down the whole community path.
Right.
Was creating this user group because there wasn't one here, and I selfishly wanted one. The same kind of mentality goes into why Midwest Dreamin exists.
Hmm.
I learned about Dreamforce in my first year in the ecosystem, wanted to attend, and my boss said, well, we can let you have company time to go out to San Francisco for the conference, but we don't have the budget to send
Yeah.
you because our Salesforce administrator needs to go, our developers need to go. Back then I was the reporting analyst. I was definitely a Salesforce user, but I wasn't a power knowledge kind of person on. And she said, but if you want to come on out to San Francisco and go to the conference, you're welcome to use company time for it. You don't have to use vacation time, but you have to pay for the event yourself. 15 years ago, a week in San Francisco seemed pretty expensive to me. Pretty
It's
cheap by
incredible.
today's standards, I would
I got to tell
imagine.
you, it is a real limiting problem to that event. Even if you work for a big company and
Mm,
even if you have a budget,
right.
it's
Yep.
still like who's going and who's staying home. It's just not a slam dunk.
It's definitely an investment, is the best way to
Well,
look
I
at it,
think
I
I think
think.
it's unfortunate, frankly, that it's such a big event in that city that the hotels hugely jack up their prices, and so do
Hmm.
the airlines. And I know why they do it in San Francisco, obviously. I think, I mean, I'm probably going to get death spears thrown at me, but I think if they did it in, for example, a city like Vegas, which wouldn't even feel that bump because it's made for that, I think it'd be more obtainable. Yeah, but you're right.
Mhm.
I mean, between the hotels, the airfare, and the actual cost of the event, I think I remember I used to budget 10 grand a person of my
Yeah.
team,
Yeah.
just to be safe by the time throw in food and taxis and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that whole experience of not being able to go to Dreamforce that first year in the ecosystem, that's what led me to start Midwest Dreamin.
Mm,
I half jokingly say it was purely selfish reasons because I could not go to Dreamforce. So I thought I'll just bring Dreamforce to me.
I think it's a hell of a good
I
story.
mean, it was an interesting approach, and I figured out. I thought, well, I'll just find a hotel to hold a
Hmm.
conference. I'll find some people to come speak. I'll find a handful of sponsors, and we'll just see what happens. The whole event that year cost about $12,000 to pull off. Found enough sponsors to pay for the whole thing. I charged attendees $25 to come, just as some sort of commitment they'd actually show up. Because if there's money on the
Right.
line, people are more likely to do it rather than it being a free event. And it worked. Had about 100 people show up to a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky for a day-long Salesforce event. That hotel was willing to work with me on a no money down kind of approach just based on a business plan I created around here's this conference, here's what I'm going to charge for it, here's where I think the money's going to come from. And every deadline they set on we need deposits from you
Hmm.
to hold the space. Thanks to me getting sponsors coming in and registrations happening, I was able to meet. And it worked out. It just, by coincidence, probably more than anything, it turned out to be a successful event. That was 2011.
Yeah. Wow.
And then 2012, 2013, my work life got too busy. I couldn't pull off the conference, but people kept talking about it over those 2 years. And it's like,
Hmm.
when are you going to do this again? I became an MVP in 2013 and started that user group in 2011. So by mid 2013, I really knew a lot more people in the ecosystem. And at that point, I decided I need to bring Midwest Dreamin back to life because people are still asking about it. So I went out to the community, the MVP community, the user group leader community, and said, hey, who attended Midwest Dreamin 2 years ago and wants to help me do it again? And a whole bunch of hands went up to try to fire this thing back up. So it lived in Chicago for 6 more years and grew from, well, that year in Louisville was 100 people. The first year in Chicago was about 500 people. And its biggest year in Chicago was a little over 900 people. And then post COVID, we moved to Minneapolis and we've seen close to 1,100 in our biggest year at this point. So it's continuing to grow. I think it's slowed a little bit over the last couple of years, but I think ultimately the trend is still kind of growing upward from an attendance perspective.
And what month? It's
It's in July,
in
July
July.
16th through the 18th this year, in Minneapolis at the Hyatt Regency where it was last year.
Yeah,
Half a
I
day
plan
on
to.
the
I'm plan to attend. I mean, I think I've told you I've put in to potentially speak there, so we'll see how that goes. But regardless, it's a great story, and it's funny. Oh my gosh, end of the '90s, I started to get really involved with Linux because it was really starting to hit at that point. And I remember I attended some local user groups, and I stopped going because even though it was probably like 1% of the 1% of the population even knew what Linux was at that point in time. Man, the people who were at these user groups, oh, they were like Einsteins of Linux already. I'm like, where did you guys all pick this up so quickly? And I just felt so like a fish out of water. But I'm still a big proponent of Linux. It's intellectually interesting. But user groups, and it sounds like yours in particular is they're pretty amazing things. Now, does anyone go to this, or most of them already Salesforce kind of like certified or admins, or are they also companies wondering about it?
Yeah, the population we've seen at Midwest Dreamin over the years has shifted around a little bit. In general, probably 60 to 65% are people that are already in the ecosystem that have been working in it for a while, that are either consultants or working
Hmm.
at it at businesses where they're solo admins or working on a team. The other is potentially executives, marketers, people brand new to the ecosystem who are just trying to get their feet wet, trying to learn about it, and heard about the event somehow through someone else. And so we've seen a pretty decent amount of growth, I think, in the rookies, if you will, in
Hmm.
the ecosystem coming to the event over the last few years. I almost credit Salesforce for some of that because of their big push a few years ago about this is a great place to be. There's lots of job opportunities.
Right.
Get certified, get a job was kind of the mantra that they had going, which I have mixed emotions about that one. I don't know if it's a little known secret or if I've said it enough times where it's widely known. Even with all of my years in this ecosystem and all the success I have seen, I hold 0 certifications in
Right.
Salesforce.
It's funny. So I think I have sysadmin. I think I got in 2015, and what did I just get recently? See, I think I got an AI related one, and I thought, and it's even look. I think it's even true. Just education in general. I would much rather have someone with experience and the ability to be adaptable than I would with somebody with certifications.
Is there value in them? Yeah, I'll
Sure.
argue, sure, there is definitely. I think for a lot of people, the certification is the foot in the door to a new opportunity, but then they have to prove their value and their actual knowledge once they get in the door. For me personally, I have tried the admin
Mm-hmm.
exam 3 different times,
Mm-hmm.
have not been successful, as I said earlier. I've never been an admin at an organization, so I've never done all of that kind of
Right.
stuff on a day-to-day basis. I tried one of the marketing exams as well as a beta
Mm-hmm.
exam and didn't pass that one either. Just I was given the opportunity, so I thought, yeah, let's just try it and see what it's like. It was a learning experience for me. It was interesting to see the exam and go through that process. But personally, for me and the career path that I've chosen, that I seem to be gravitating towards, I don't see the value in certifications, so
Yeah,
I
I
don't
agree.
pursue them. So,
I get that. I get that. Now, so as we come to the end of this, you just touched on something. So, what's next for you? What do you think? What does the
wow.
crystal ball say is next for Eric?
That's a good one. A little over 2 years ago, well, probably close to 2.5 years ago now, I left an organization and went independent
Mm-hmm.
and have been doing the solo independent consulting thing since then. I know in the one pager you and I shared a little while back as kind of prep for this call, one of the questions that you had was something like, how do you do business development for yourself? Yeah, and my own journey as an independent consultant, I didn't really actively, all of my business came from conversations I had about something else. A lot of it from companies that were interested in sponsoring Midwest Dreamin. I'd talk to them about the conference. I'd show them the value of sponsoring. We'd start talking about, well, what other things can you maybe help us with? And like, well, here's the things that I enjoy doing. Here's what I'm good at. And that led to business,
Right.
and enough business to keep me going for, well, 2.5 years now, as busy as I wanted to be. But what's next for me? I've enjoyed the flexibility and the freedom of this independent consultant life. So for me, my next step is I'm looking for my next home. I don't necessarily would say I'm going to hang up the independent consultant shingle, but I'll probably put it back to a side hustle and do small projects now and then and try to focus on a full-time gig somewhere else.
So, Eric, what's the best way? And I'll put this in the show notes as well. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Probably the easiest thing is simply Eric at Dresh for Success. That's the first part of my
That's
last name,
fantastic.
for
I love that domain.
success.com. Yeah, a former colleague of mine at one of one of the companies I used to work at, after I left the company, she said, "So what are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, I'm an independent consultant now, trying to figure out how to market myself, how to make it so people know who I am and what I do." And she just blurted it right out. She just said, "Well, you should just go with Dresh for Success because it's who you are and what you do." And I'm like, that's brilliant.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Danielle.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Danielle, one more time for that. I told her every time I talk about this, I'm going to give her credit for it. And it's just been fun. It's
Very
been
cool.
pretty cool. So Eric at dressforsuccess.com will get you right to me. And I'm happy to have conversations about whatever, anything Salesforce related practically.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I will reiterate the fact that you're a great guy to talk to. You know what you're talking about. I would welcome. I would encourage anyone to reach out. Eric, I hope I see you in Minneapolis in July, and
I
I
will
assume
be
you're going to
there.
be there. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
I have teased the team almost every single year since about 2016 that, yeah, maybe I'll come back to Midwest Dreamin next year. And they just keep laughing at me like, yeah, you'll be there. We know you're going to be there. Stop saying that.
I remember last year's. I saw the pictures of. I mean, I just remember the still shot of you speaking up in front of a group. But It's got to be a lot of fun for you. And you should definitely be proud of that. And I'm sure, hopefully you are, but I mean, you should be. It's really,
Oh
really
yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's been a fun ride. It's been enjoyable. I liken it to watching a grandchild be born. Actually, it's an effort on a lot of people's parts. It's not something that happens on its own. That's the one question I think I get the most is why do you do it? What's in it for you?
Mm,
And for me, there's a ton of effort. I mean, not a week goes by probably throughout the entire year when I'm not doing something Midwest Dreamin related. But for me, the one little random meeting of somebody at an event somewhere,
mm,
and they look at me and they say, "Hey, aren't you the guy that started Midwest Dreamin?"
right.
And they go on to tell me their own Midwest Dreamin story
That's
of,
cool.
I attended this year and here's what I learned and it changed the whole trajectory of my career. And I just
You,
want to say thanks. And one of those little thanks is about all I need to keep going for a whole
you
nother
know,
year.
For myself, I've become more wise and experienced. I find that mentoring, training is more valuable than anything else right now to me. I'm doing it, and you hire a me to ensure that the overarching thing gets done and meets everyone's expectations. And I open doors, I knock down barriers, and I make sure everything is making sense. It's
Yep.
very, very easy, and this is not meant to be a slam against developers. It's very, very easy for a developer in any system to not necessarily fully comprehend everything that's going on outside of that, and things can easily go astray, and you run it for a project standpoint, you go over budget. And so that's what you hire me for. I mean, we've just been doing this so many years, and that's kind of frankly what my first book is about. How not to f up a CRM. It's basically a book of case studies of little things that people didn't think were big things, and they actually were.
Yeah.
And they're easily avoidable. So
Yep.
anyway, Eric, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
And
my pleasure, Michael.
I,
Appreciate you
I
having me on.
appreciate it so much. And you're a joy to speak with. And I wish you all the best. And thanks. And I hope to see you in person in a couple months.
Sounds awesome. Thanks for
Take care,
having
man.
me. Bye.